morning and welcome to Johannesburg to the Centennial celebrations of 100 years of Rotary in Africa. Basic education and literacy is one of the 7 areas of focus of Rotary International. Clubs around the world support activities and training to improve education for all children and literacy for both children and adults. Today, we have an incredible panel discussion focusing on too little access, not enough learning, solving Africa's twin deficit in education. My name is Lee-Ann Shearing, past District Governor of Rotary District 9210 and current Regional Public Image Coordinator for Region 28, Southern Africa. A little bit of background. At the dawn of independence, respective incoming African leaders were very quick to prioritize education on their development agendas. Attaining universal primary education, they maintained, would help post-independent Africa lift itself out of abject poverty. As governments began to build schools and post teachers to even the farthest corners of the continent, with assistance from organizations, either religious or otherwise, and other partners, children began to fill the classrooms. Africa's education crisis seldom makes media headlines or summit agendas. With 1 in 3 children still out of school, progress towards universal primary education has stalled. Meanwhile, learning levels among children who are in school are abysmal. According to the newly developed Learning Barometer, the Center for Universal Education estimates that 61 million African children will reach adolescence lacking even the most basic literacy and numeracy skills. Failure to tackle the learning deficit will deprive a whole generation of opportunities to develop their potential and escape poverty, and it will undermine prospect for dynamic growth with shared prosperity. I'd now like you to help me welcome our incredible panel. Dr. David Harrison, Chief Executive Officer of the DG Murray Trust. Welcome, David. Ms. Trina Mhlophe, Director of the Trina Maseko Heritage Trust, and also where we celebrate a 20th year anniversary today of her literacy program, Mother of Books. Welcome, Trina. Mr. Hatim El Tayeb, Dean of School of the African Leadership Academy. Welcome, welcome, Hatim. And last but by no means least, Bonnie Mbithi, Chief Executive Officer, Computer for Schools, Kenya. Welcome, Bonnie. Now, panel, we have some interesting discussions lined up, so I will ask you to perhaps share with us some of the inputs that you have gleaned over the years in your respective positions. So first of all, I would like to ask David. David, Africa is not the same throughout, and each region in Africa presents very different challenges. Can you perhaps give us a breakdown of the challenges in basic education that you've identified in your particular region of the continent, or in any of the regions that you may have worked in?
Thanks, Lee-Ann, and it's really great to be part of this panel, and thank you very much for everybody who's watching and listening in. I think before we start talking about issues of access, I think it's useful for us to start with the basics, to start with the roots of learning, because if we don't understand what constitutes learning, if we don't understand what enables children to actually get educated, we're not going to be able to design the right sort of interventions. We're going to end up going down the same old routes that don't improve outcomes at all. I'm reading an amazing book at the moment by an author called Robert Macfarlane called The Old Ways, and he traces the Proto-Germanic roots of the word learning back to the idea of learning as following or trying to find a track. It really conjures up the idea of exploration, of adventure, of seeking out new vistas. And that fundamentally is what learning is about. Learning is about stimulating curiosity and imagination and a process of self-discovery through wordplay and through physical play and simulation and open-endedness. And that's the type of environment that has to be stimulated. And I think that one of the big problems we have on the African continent and in fact globally is in a way a dumbing down of learning and education. That it has become far more prosaic, has become more didactic, more rote, more close-ended, as if we're following a railroad as opposed to a track into the mountains. And so my starting pitch really would to say that there are these amazing pathways that children need to explore. And we've got to ensure that the environment that we create is one which actually stimulates their mind, enables them to explore, enables them to problem solve, because those are exactly the skills that are needed for a postmodern type of environment. Obviously, there are also conditions for learning that must be in place. We know the importance of food and nutrition. What we don't pay enough attention to are issues of love and security and the importance of emotion in shaping children's ability to learn. We know that information is actually channeled through the emotional centers of the brain, and through that process is either stymied or in fact enhanced. And so as we think about the type of learning that we need on our continent, we have to be thinking about how we bring together and respond to the emotional and psychological challenges of our children as much as we do to the 3 R's.
David, thank you. Very insightful indeed, and extremely thought-provoking for all the people involved in education, not only through Africa, but in other parts of the world as well. As you say, we need to have stimulating environments. So perhaps I will ask Hatim, do you think that there's a silver bullet, as it were, to solving these challenges? If there isn't a one-size-fits-all, how do we approach things systematically to try and solve these very real challenges, not only for now, but for generations to come?
I think it's important, without sounding like we're beating the same old drum, whenever we're talking about challenges on the African continent or anywhere in the global south, to appreciate that 100 years ago, we were starting with a system that was built for a different purpose. Education systems across the continent that we inherited from colonial systems weren't designed for universal access. They weren't designed for universal empowerment. In fact, they weren't that way anywhere in the world. And so we leave colonialism with a pretty bad set of facts. And then we have this really immense aspiration to say we're going to create a system that gives everyone a dignified life. Add to that, that even in the most advanced and well-resourced societies in the world, this is a difficult problem. It's not a difficult problem just here. Some of the richest economies in the world struggle with significant inequality and with worsening education outcomes in the current millennium, which is shocking. And it becomes easier to understand when we appreciate just how complex an undertaking education is. And I think a lot of what Dr. Harrison pointed out, these important ideas about what makes the brain tick, what makes education worthwhile, these are things that we still have long-winded debates about. And the fact that we're still debating the fundamentals makes it really hard to solve the problem. So it's not all bad news. I think that even though there's no silver bullet, there's a few things that we should pay attention to. I do think in the last 25 years, at least, in my short experience in school leadership, that some of the research-backed, evidence-backed sort of approaches are becoming more and more agreed upon. Some of it is, grounded in cognitive science. We know things about, interleaving or distributed practice, or just how memory works. We know things about dual coding and how we take in information. We've been able to do away with some of the myths that we've been acquiring for a while around learning styles. And I think increasingly teachers, schools, education systems across the world and certainly on the continent are being equipped with good information. I think a persistent challenge, on the other hand, and something that requires a systematic resolution is this is slow going work. We're not going to see results in a day or 2 days or a month, but we need to have the patience to make meaningful investment over a really long period of time. And I think once people are willing to hold politicians to account over a long period of time and not expect, overnight results, things will be a little better. I'd love to go back. I just take one quick comment on what Dr. Harrison said. An interesting example when we talk about discovery and play as the center of learning that some people will point out is they say at the very beginning of the typical education life journey in kindergarten, there's very little structure and we let people discover by learning. And then at the very end, when you're doing a PhD, it's the same. No one's telling you what to do. And it's everywhere in between that we insist on having a lot more structure. And the one thing I'll say about that is I absolutely believe that learning should be joyful, but especially when we're talking about literacy and basic skills, there is a responsibility we have as educators to make sure that school leavers are equipped with meaningful knowledge and skills that allows them to access a dignified life. And some of that you can acquire by discovery, but some of them it's useful just to point in the right direction. But I'll stop there.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you. What really excites me is that learning should be joyful. And I think, although here we're talking about early learning and education at schools, I think they can further. So even once you've left university, every time you go to a seminar or whatever, learning should be joyful. It shouldn't always be this serious, I'm head of this huge corporation. So, and that's one thing that's going to stick with me for a long time. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm now going to go to somebody who I know is passionate about literacy, because we've heard we're celebrating a birthday today. For 20 years of this wonderful, wonderful initiative. Fina, can I please ask you, what do you feel is the most exciting or perhaps the most effective learning environment would be in an ideal world?
Thank you so much. It's a great honor to be part of this very, very important discussion. And I have always wanted to know, the curiosity, I guess it's somewhere in the factory when they designed me, there was always that curiosity. I wanted to know things. I always asked questions. And other members of my family didn't know what to do with me. If they could send me back to the factory, they would have. But then I had a grandmother who said, in fact, I do have a story just about that. And she told me a story. And so starting with the oral tradition, with the beauty of language, because the storytelling comes with language, the way you taste the words, the way the images are painted in your minds, the way you travel to other worlds and come back again. So it started there, so that by the time I set foot in a classroom, and I was able to learn to read and write, I was already groomed, and the art of listening was sharpened already. I don't remember a teacher saying to me, listen. No. I was already trained in that department. And so I think everything that I do when I work in the space where we are promoting literacy, and even when I was still in full-time theater or traveling and doing different work in different countries and back in my country, it's always bringing that element of fun and stimulating curiosity and saying everybody is different. And sometimes I find that education systems are trying to make everybody uniform. Do it like this, and if you are nicely uniformed, you're definitely going to go far. Brilliant. Get this, regurgitate, write, pass, next class. I think in an ideal world, we should be able to allow young people to be different, to be themselves. And another thing that is important is to be loved, to have a sense of confidence, to know that I am me. I'm fine just as I am. And then you get the information. And when we allow children to be themselves and hopefully to be safe, because another problem in young people's lives is lack of security, lack of safety, and also the elements, so you've hardly had enough food to eat and you walk more than an hour to school, and there are so many hurdles, but there are children who make it in spite of all of that. And then there are teachers who are unbelievably dedicated and committed, and I always make it my business to honor those types of teachers, because in the 20 years of our literacy campaign, Nozincwadi, not to mention the teachers who inspired me personally, in our literacy campaign, we've zigzagged all 9 provinces. We have seen teachers who give everything of themselves beyond the call of duty. But when you listen to the news, they talk about the teachers who do everything wrong, and that's all they prefer to publicize. So I'm thinking, yes, there are difficulties, many challenges, no silver bullet, but there are amazing, amazing teachers, and there are children who are unstoppable, who push no matter what. And so we need to encourage that. We need to retell those stories again and again. I'll stop right there. We'll continue. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you, Nina. Yes, I 100% agree. You know, the news always talks about the doom and gloom. We need to look at prioritizing the good things that are happening, lauding those teachers who, as you say, give over and above themselves to educate our children.
Yeah.
And to make learning fun for our children. So thank you so much for sharing your insights from a personal point of view. I'm going to move on to Bonnie now. And Bonnie, I'm going to go into the sort of IT space, if you will. So as technology moves the world forward, and we all know that finding itself in many classrooms around the globe, especially in light of this COVID pandemic, supposedly helping kids to learn better, access information faster, etc. But we often speak of the bridging of this technology divide. My question to you is, how do you think we should go about leapfrogging these challenges to position our learners amongst the most advanced in the world? Bonnie.
Thank you. And it's a pleasure to be part of this great panel. I must say, starting from where David started, when it comes to learning requires imagination, needs stimulating the mind of the learner. Yeah. And when you apply technology, that is one way you're sure that you will definitely ignite the mind of the learner. And with technology, you realize that you also make the learner to be unlimited. You can learn from anywhere. Yeah, classroom can be anywhere. I like how the past speakers have said learning is joyful. Yeah, for us, we believe in the tech world, we believe that learning can be anywhere. And you can see the huge appetite of devices all over the world. If only we convert that appetite to also try to make kids understand that using these devices could also be a way of learning, so that you combine the urge for using technology and learning to make learning exciting. You find kids nowadays, if it's not fun, it's not exciting, you find they'll also not want to learn. Yeah, if you use the traditional ways of teaching, not all these kids want to learn. They will feel education is boring and learning is boring. So thus we believe that technology is a different way of doing things. And for you to get the right technology, you don't just have to do whatever everybody else is doing. You have to also look at the needs of the particular group. For example, if it is our countries in Africa, we need to see what needs do we have in terms of technology. You don't just provide devices and you also don't look at the aspect of security. Because if you're having devices that kids can access technology and they can access any material on the internet, that's also another problem, another social problem that you're creating. So it has to be something that is well designed. You look at all aspects of the life of the child. If it is things like coding, let that coding be a way of learning. Let it be, it's technical. You want these kids to learn programming, but as they're learning this programming, it's also fun. Learning is about problem solving. So if you're solving a program or a code, it becomes exciting if you solve one code, you want to solve the next code. Yeah, so you just have to find a way, and I believe there's a scientific way into it. When you look at even the kids nowadays, a 2-year-old is able to operate mobile phones. I mean, most of the older generations interacted with mobile phones way later, if you look at even computers. So why not use that appetite and that thirst for devices to also convert it into a way of making learning fun?
Thanks, Bonnie. Excellent indeed. Learning must be fun. That's coming through loud and clear. But the way you spoke about teachers and parents segues nicely into the very next question. What is the role of the teacher, and how can parents assist in progressing their children's learning?
I think the teacher needs to know their content very well in a way that they can bring it to life and demonstrate mastery and attract in young people a desire to achieve excellence. And I think we can all remember that terrific history teacher or math teacher or French teacher or whatever it is the subject was that you didn't like until the first day in that person's lesson, when you thought, oh, actually, I could get into this. And it's because they could bring it to life. I think teachers need to know their students well. And that means the specific individuals in their classroom, but I think it also means understanding a little bit about how learning happens, so that you can anticipate the sorts of mistakes that might occur, and think about the different approaches that will engage them and help them make the progress that they need to make. And then the third thing, which is an interesting idea I've recently been introduced to, that teachers also should have a strong relationship with themselves, an understanding of why they do the work that they do, and a way to bring integrity into the classroom. Because I think even if you're extremely knowledgeable, but haven't really consolidated your sense of self, you're not going to be able to lead the whole person kind of learning that it is that we've been talking about. Mm. And I think when you've got those three things, maybe not every single lesson will be fun, and maybe that's not a realistic expectation. But at the end of a journey, at the end of a learning sequence, young people can and should feel fulfilled, and they should feel like their time was spent meaningfully. I think I'll say a little bit less about the role of the parent. Not being a parent myself, but having been a teacher, I feel like I have the right to talk in the teacher's voice. Maybe someone else will want to add to it. But I think that parents need to be invested in schools and not just in their own children. Because what really enables a meaningful experience for your child is a healthy, successful school environment, and not just advocating for your own child's interests. And there are probably ways in which every parent can contribute to the whole school community, whether it's through their networks, through their resources, through their time. And I think the more families become integrated with the school environment, the more beneficial it is for all learners.
Great. Hatim, thank you. That's a wonderful insight, and one which I hope we can carry forward to many parents out there. Invest in the school, not only in the child, which increase tremendously the work of the teachers, because they will be appreciated as a school, not just as teaching somebody's little darling. Okay, David, if I could ask you, we all know that early childhood development has been a major challenge, especially in our part of the world. And obviously there are many hurdles like nutrition, good nutrition, reading and writing with understanding before they start mainstream primary schooling. Do you have any insights or suggestions or comments perhaps on some of your most important challenges that you feel should be addressed, and any possible solutions? I know Rome wasn't built in a day, so we're not expecting you to solve it all today, but we would like to hear your thoughts, David.
Yes, I think it's useful for us to remember that a child's first teacher is in fact his or her caregiver or parent, and so I think we need to sort of understand the process of learning and education as a scaffolding that happens from before birth, and continues steadily, and if it can be built upon, we're really going to be able to capitalize. We're going to get higher returns on our investment the more and more we're able to invest in that child and through school. And so I think one of the big failings and one of the potential opportunities for the African continent is to take early learning and early childhood development more seriously, to understand its value, to understand that if we truly invest in children, we will get far greater returns, not only in terms of education, but ultimately in terms of throughput into higher education and ultimately into economic productivity. Early childhood development is probably the most powerful investment in human capital that a country can make. And for some reason, we don't want to make that investment. So what needs to be done? I mean, we've got to start with where we are today. We can't assume that in the next 10 years, every single child is going to be in a glamorous early learning center. We have to start with where children are at. And a lot of children are in some form of out-of-home caregiving. They may be with a gorgo, an old granny, or with some sort of informal center. That's an opportunity. If we start to enhance that experience, if we start to enrich the training and the education that those children obtain in those settings, those children will be much better off. And so starting to look for not only center-based early learning opportunities, but play groups, structured out-of-home learning experiences where we can bring quality training, quality investment in those caregivers into the lives of those children will get us from about 30 or 40% coverage that we have at the moment in South Africa to maybe 60 or 70%. But then ultimately, government needs to understand that keeping on investing and pouring more money into the end of the human capital pipeline, where you have massive dropouts, 50% dropouts from school before matric, massive dropouts in higher education. Those are going to persist until we look at the entire continuum of education and make the right sort of investments that are needed at the beginning of the pipeline. The final point I want to make is that it's absolutely clear that children can't learn on an empty stomach, and the importance of bringing together food and nutrition and early learning in a basic package, rather than seeing them as two separate things, is absolutely critical if in fact we're going to make gains.
Yeah, David, thank you. Again, great insights. We've got to make sure that the early learning is developed, and it's only our training the caregivers. We're uplifting their lives as well as giving much better start to others. We could go on and on and on about this subject, which I'm sure is to everybody in the world, but you know, we're time constrained today. So I'd like to thank the panel so sincerely for giving of their time and of their expertise and sharing some of the thoughts and ideas and possible solutions to some of the education challenges that face us. And may you long continue to teach and train children to develop to their full potential in Southern Africa, in East Africa, in Africa, and the world beyond. Thank you all so very much for being part of this panel today. And as I say, I wish we could have gone on much longer. You are so appreciated for the roles that you play. And again, thank you so much for being part of this discussion. We have all learned an enormous amount of information. Thank you indeed.